Adobe Illustrator beginner course. Whether you're using the cloud version, as in the latest version, or whether you have pre-installed Adobe Illustrator. In this video session, I'll show you the basics of Adobe Illustrator. It doesn't matter which version of Illustrator you're using. Basically, Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based image editing software. I'll show you this example. If you're like me and install the software for the first time, and looking at all these options, it could seem overwhelming, because that's what happened to me at the beginning. But then I thought, you know what, I'm gonna just learn, just watch some other tutorials, read some web pages back then. But now I'm very comfortable in terms of the options. So let's dive right into it. Basically what I'm suggesting to you is, when you're beginning to learn Illustrator and how to use it, don't be overwhelmed, because by practice you'll gain the experience that you need. Okay, so let's create a new file. We can just select pixels, because I like to work with pixels, but you may select centimeters or millimeters. And let's say 900 pixels. We can give it a name that's meaningful. Let's say examples of Illustrator. Let's now save the file. Basically, this is our artboard. We can press on Ctrl- key to zoom out, or Ctrl+ key to zoom in. Here we have magnifying glass icon. We can use that as well to zoom in, or we can press on Alt on our keyboard and zoom out. But it's good to learn the shortcuts even if you're beginning. Shortcuts that will be helpful, such as zoom in, zoom out. Here on the left hand side we have our tools panel. I can actually move that, as in unstick it from the user interface, as we see. If you like it to be on the right, you can perhaps leave it there, and you can minimize it too. So I'd like to have it on the left. Simply hover over it. You'll see the color change when you do that. As we can see, it wants to stick there. There we go. Now, from our tools, as we can see that we've got plenty of tools here. But if you're beginning to learn, then selection tool basically selects everything or selects only certain areas. Here we have direct selection tool. What's the difference between the two? Because Illustrator is vector based, it creates paths, and direct selection tool allows you to select or modify a path. We've got our type tool. We can actually type text if we want. And when we finish with it, we can actually make it big or small, or even change the font, as we can see. We can press on Ctrl-Z to go back. That will definitely be helpful as you're learning. Here we have Shapes tool. We can actually remove, as in tear off, certain tools as well. Let's create a rectangle, and also let's press on Shift key on our keyboard and then create the rectangle, because then it's perfectly proportioned, as we can see. So holding down Shift key will definitely be helpful. Also, we can press on V on our keyboard, because that will be our selection tool. V is to select, so I can select that, or I can select both of them, or I can select all of it. While here, let's imagine you want to create a perfect circle. Hold down Shift, but let's say you want to place that circle on top of the text while you're creating. Then you simply hold spacebar and put it there. Yeah, because Illustrator works with paths and vector-based calculations, you have your layers panel here. Let's grab that layer and put it here, because now that text is above, and now I can change the color. Your color options are here. You can actually press on the swatches and select different color types. You also have gradients. Let's actually hold and copy the layer. So we can copy layers like this, or we can hold Shift, select 3 layers and copy all of them. And then on our layers panel, we have this eye icon. You can actually not see certain things. Let's say you don't want to see this layer. Let's actually move that there. Let's move this here, make this smaller. And then let's hide that one. Or we can lock a layer. That means it's locked. Now I can't work with it. Now I'd like to have the layer panel show like this, but you can actually change how that looks. Panel options, you can make them large, as we can see. That may be helpful. So now let's select this circle. Let's select predefined gradients that comes with Illustrator, and let's select simple radials. Let's select that. Let's press purple radial, and voila, we've added our gradient. Our gradient panel is here, or we can have it anywhere we want. As you're progressing, you'll be more comfortable with how you're working, as in the layout of the tools and so on. Then you can actually save your workspace and make it yours. Give it a name, your workspace, as an example. Because as you're learning, you'll be familiar with certain tools, because the way that you're going to use Illustrator will be different. So you can customize the workspace. What you're seeing on the screen is our workspace. Now, let's select this. Let's move it while we hold the mouse key. We can move it anywhere. And then here in our gradient panel, if we don't see it, we can go to Window and select Gradient. As you can see, that's gone now. But if I want to see my gradients, let's go to Gradients. So these are our options. And as I've said, if you're beginning, don't be overwhelmed with trying to learn all this stuff. But just experiment with the tools, create new layers, copy them, delete them. Let's delete this one here, or this one here. Just press on the delete, as in the bin icon. Let's press on that. Yes, delete it. Let's grab and place it with our hand icon, as we can see. So we can delete things like this as well. Now let's continue working on this gradient. That's radial, but I can change it to linear. Let's add another color. Double click on the color and change it, as we can see. I'll show you the brush. You have your brushes here. You can double click and change its fidelity as well as smoothness. Actually, I need to increase the pixels to make it bigger. I'm using a preset here. As we can see, let's actually grab that, put that out if we want, select these and clean that up. Select that, double click, let's clean the paths. Now, with my brush, I can double click. As we can see, we've got the smoothness, fidelity. Also, Adobe Illustrator comes with predefined brush sets. You can even duplicate or create a new brush as well. As we can see, we have brush library. Let's imagine an artistic. Let's select this one. And let's grab that, 30. Let's grab this. That's different brush, as we can see. Now, let's highlight all. Actually, let's press on A, direct selection tool, and select these. Works much easier. Then we have our pen tool. Let's tear that out. Because you're working with Illustrator, that is vector based, let's try to master the pen tool, which will take a bit of practice on your part. Let's press one dot. Press, we've just created a path. Let's create another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Let's now close that path. Now, basically we used our pen tool, created some paths, and we can close it, or if we don't, that's okay as well. It's just a path. Now, it doesn't matter which vector based element you're working with, they are all path based. Now, let's select our direct selection tool. Let's tear that out and come here. Let's press on the path, or press on this one here. Now, while holding the path down, I can actually manipulate that path. Or this one. Or this one. Also, I can delete a path if I want, or add a new one onto a path. And select direct selection tool and manipulate the path like so. Pen tool is your friend. You need to play around with it and learn it. As I've said at the beginning, it's going to be a challenge. Because, to get used to it, it takes a bit of time. But when you're working with the pen tool, we can actually grab this here as well. Convert anchor point tool. What does that mean? That path, we can do something like this, as we can see. Then press on A on your keyboard, direct selection tool, and we can actually grab that tool and grab a handle and remove the handle if we want. So let's delete that. Let's delete that too. Now let's grab the shape itself, because this is path based too. Let's add more paths to it. Direct selection tool, press on it. Now we can see the paths. On our layers panel, we have color references. We can change that depending on the color that you're working with. That's red, perhaps that's much easier to see and work with. Let's select direct selection tool and let's move that. Let's make a Pac-Man. Let's grab this. Let's press V, selection tool, and let's resize it. And let's move that here. Now that layer is below this one here, so we need to put that up. Change the color. Okay, let's grab that shape and let's press A on our keyboard. And let's actually modify the handle too if we want. Okay. Now, as we can see, this gradient, the end of it should be perhaps different color. Let's do that, as we can see. So, when you're learning Adobe Illustrator, you have many different tools. As I've said, don't be overwhelmed. These are your layers panel, and these are your tools, and these are all different settings. Let's highlight everything. Okay, let's say Pac-Man. Let's align it to the center. Now that's still a text, but that's an object. Let's expand the text. Expand object and fill. Now that's path, as we can see. Just like before, we can now work on this, but that's red color and I can't see where the paths are. Let's change the color reference. Let's make it blue. Now I can zoom in and say, okay, you know what? I wanna work on this here. Press A as a direct selection tool. Directly select an anchor point, and let's directly select this anchor point. And as you can see, the guides tells me that that lines up here, as we can see. Now let's select everything. Can actually grab the eyedropper, eye sampler tool, and grab this color pattern if we want. Or we can press Ctrl Z to go back, as in undo. Undo can be done through Edit, Undo, the last action. Let's press Ctrl minus to zoom out. And while holding the Shift, I can move the artboard. Now, let's do something like this. Let's change the color. And let's put that in the middle and down the bottom. Align it as such. Okay, so we can do that. You'll definitely be using the alignment tool a lot. We can actually group different layers and different objects. You can select object, group. Now that's grouped together. If I align it, it'll align accordingly, as in grouped. Now that's in the middle. In this example, we have aligned the object to the artboard, but we have different settings here. We can align to selection. Let's imagine this scenario. Let's imagine we want to duplicate this. We can duplicate the layer. We can do that. Or we can copy paste, Control. Okay, we can highlight and then we can press Control C, Control V. So we can do that too. Shortcuts are your friend. Learn them. Not all of them, but the ones that you'll use the most, such as Control minus to zoom in, zoom out. Zoom out, Control minus. Zoom in, Control plus. Direct selection tool is A. Normal selection tool is V. Okay. And what I tend to do while working on a layer, I actually duplicate and then lock it so I can't delete it. Now I can work with this, and if something goes wrong, I've got a backup here. So now in this example, let's do something like this. Let's put some effects. You have predefined effects. You can feather. Feather will blur the outside of it. Or experiment with different styles such as drop shadow. Let's preview before we make changes. And as you can see, quickly and easily you've added some styles. So effects will be your friend. And here we have windows. Let's say you ever want to get the characters, which is your type. Type settings. You have many different settings and many different fonts. Whatever is installed, you can use different fonts. Attributes, document info, pathfinder, all these you'll learn as you practice more and more. But I'll show you a couple of tricks with the pathfinder. Let's remove the view by unchecking the icon, and let's work on this layer 3. Let's create a shape, then let's create another shape. Let's create a circle, but this time we'll select we'll create a circle and change its color. Let's say make it purple. Now with your pathfinder, look what you can do. This will actually be great. You'll actually use this. Let's say you've created two different objects here. You can select both of them and use your pathfinder to either group items, or let's undo that, or you can minus the front or intersect or exclude. Pathfinder, as in we've got shape modes or pathfinders. Let's divide. That's divided now. When it's divided, I can select all and expand. Now look, as you can see, that's how you use the pathfinder options here. And you can say, okay, I'm not happy with that, let's go there, and then let's do something like that. Create new shapes. So you've got your shapes here. You've got your selection tool that you'll use the most. You got your brushes, predefined ones as well. Adobe Illustrator comes with predefined brushes. Also, while here, let me show you this. Let's say you're working with a brush, or you're working with paths. Let's say you created a path and thought, you know what, you colored it, you changed its color, this is your stroke. But okay, let me show you this because it's important. Let's say you created an object. What you're seeing here is the stroke. Then you have the fill option. Means now you have a stroke and a fill. You can change the colors of it and reverse it. Also, you can add more stroke or more fill. Let's add another one, but this time make that green. And this time let's make that 3. Let's zoom in. You can see. So you can add more. You're working with strokes and you're filling them. Or even you can even add a new fill layer and say, okay, how about orange? Make that like this. Okay. Let's gradient that. So then let me show you this, as I was going to show you your brushes, right? Let's say you created a brush of your own. you modified the path and you think to yourself, you know what, I want to expand that. You've expanded it. You can do many things. You can add new paths to it. You can add mesh points, all this stuff. And let's say you want to create your own brushes. Then whatever the object that you want as a brush, you can hold and put it in your brushes window here. Select new brush type, whether it's scatter or art brush or pattern brush. You can create it as such. Modify it, and voila, you have your own brush that you can always use. Okay. Now, so basically, Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based graphic editing software. That doesn't mean you can't work with images. You can open images or even place images into your Adobe Illustrator file, like so. Let's put this sample image. We can place an image on a layer. We can duplicate the layer if we want. I tend to do that. Then we can live trace an image. Either use predefined settings such as simple trace, make changes, or let's go back. Let's say, okay, you know what, color 6, let's select that. Press on the box there, tracing options, select preview, and simply tweak blur, path fitting. Now you don't need to learn all these, but as you're making changes, you can see what changes. And then you can trace it. You can trace an image. Once you trace an image, go to Object, Expand. Now you have turned that image into vector form. So you can work with images like that. Before I close up, let's grab a shape. Let's select a shape. Let's go to 3D. Let's create extrude and bevel. As you can see, it's saying gradients will be rasterized because we're creating 3D object. Let's go to 3D. Let's select that. Go to more options. You can select the path of the light or add new light. Change its position or even its color. So we have 3D preset options, and depending on the version of Illustrator you're using, you may have more effect options here. You can even revolve or rotate a shape. Let's rotate, preview, and while here it's going to be a bit fiddly, but you can move your 3D object differently. You can use predefined settings and so on. Okay, so now let's create a 3D object. Preview, extrude depth, let's say 150 points. As you can see, it's gone bigger. Okay, let's leave it as such. Now that's a 3D object. We can add paths to it because we're working with paths really, and change its shape. You can select all, Control T. Sorry, that's for Photoshop. Let's grab the bounding box and rotate. That's a 3D Pac-Man looking, correct? Let's put an eye to it. Change the color to white and place it here. Okay. Now, when we select an object, we can see the bounding box here. The bounding box you can move with bounding box you can resize as well. Here you have view. You can hide edges or show edges. You also have rulers. Show rulers. You got rulers here. You can select guides. As in, hold down the ruler and then move it down. From the left ruler you can put a guide. Center it. Select this guide. Center it too. Your guides are here now. Basically, your rulers can be helpful. You can see hide bounding box. Okay, so let's remove the guides. Let's actually remove the rulers as well. Hide rulers. Now, let's do something like this. Let's select the object. And now let's go and say, you know what? Hide bounding box. The bounding box is hidden now. And show bounding box. This bounding box is your friend as you're working to learn Illustrator. So, rewatch this video session if you must. I've shown you the most used tools that I use. That doesn't mean you use the ones that I've just shown to you. Basically, look at your layers panel because you'll be working with layers in Illustrator. Simply, press on it, see what happens. Color changes, grab and hold, or even right click. As in, let's say this here, there's something here. You want to press that. Say duplicate layer, create new layer, flatten. You will learn that as you progress. Basically, open a new file that will be empty. And then simply start creating shapes. Hold down your spacebar. Press on A to see, okay, when I do that, that's direct selection tool. As you can see, you can't see anything, you're just seeing the path outlines. Give it a color and then work with it. While here, before I close up, let me show you the mesh tool because you'll definitely love this. Adobe Illustrator gives you the mesh tool. Once you select the object, you can create mesh points. And with your direct selection tool, you can change the color of a mesh point. As we can see, you can press within an area and then change that color to see what happens when you do that. Okay, it doesn't look good. Let's grab with this one. And how about this mesh point? Mesh could be a little bit tricky to master, but you'll definitely find that useful because it allows you to create different colors and work with colors as well. So, I've shown to you your layers panel. Your workspace is this. Create your own workspace. Your tools are here. The most used for me is direct selection tool and normal selection tool. I'd like to press on the artboard and then while holding my mouse key I just select objects as such. With my direct selection tool I may select just certain paths. You've got your shape tool, you've got your pen tool that you need to play around with. Okay, where are we? Okay, that's my pen tool. Okay, so I can now say, okay, just show me the stroke. So pen tool is gonna take a bit of time. So let me delete all before I close up. I just want to show you this too.